the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's the president and founder of Luminance Incorporation, and of course, the author of the book Brighter Days Ahead, none other than Dr. Theodore Henderson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Theodore, and welcome on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Well, I guess it's good for the audience to know I'm both an MD, trained in psychiatry, nuclear medicine, and neuroradiology, and a PhD in neurobiology. My PhD work was largely on how the growth factors play a role in the development of organization in the brain. And that has led my clinical work looking at how neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to change and repair itself, works in adult brains.
That's really fascinating, Dr. Theodore. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you. So today, let's talk about your book itself, which is For the Decades. First line treatment has centered on medications like SSRIs that modulate serotonin. Now, what fundamental shift in our understanding of depression's biology now driving these innovative new treatments you write about?
Well, the first off, I have to say that the serotonin theory of depression has been disproven. There are now 5 meta-analyses looking at collections of research studies that show that, in fact, serotonin has nothing to do with depression. And when you look at the response rate of SSRIs, that is, if you do a study with a placebo, and some of the placebo people get better, so if you subtract out that placebo rate, the actual response rate to SSRIs is around 10 to at best 16%. Literally, a study came out yesterday, and that study was on sertraline, and it looked at a large number of patients that they treated with sertraline, Zoloft, as it was known, the trade name, and the response rate was less than 10%. I mean, that's unacceptable. Why would you take a medication that has a 10% chance of working when there are so many better things to take? So what shifted in the way that we're thinking about depression is that the realization that depression is actually a degenerative process. Neurons are dying, circuits are breaking down, synapses are collapsing. And that leads to a shrinkage of the hippocampus, the part of our brain deep in our temporal lobes that's involved in learning and memory and emotion. In addition, the frontal cortex gets thinner in depression. Now, fortunately, that's a reversible kind of degeneration. With treatment, even SSRIs, if you're lucky and the moon happens to be in retrograde in Sagittarius, you might get a treatment response with an SSRI, and it can induce neuroplasticity. Therapy can induce neuroplasticity and brain repair, psychotherapy, miraculously. But if you want something that's more potent, more powerfully activating neuroplasticity, you need to look elsewhere. And where, you might ask?
Why? Where?
Exactly. So
where are they gonna go?
So one of the discoveries of the past 15 years is that an anesthetic actually turns on neuroplasticity in the brain. That anesthetic is ketamine. And so I talk about ketamine quite a bit in the book Brighter Days Ahead, because ketamine is a chemical inducer of neuroplasticity through the glutamate receptor. But there are other ways to induce neuroplasticity, such as infrared light. And that's sort of the focus of where my work has gone in the past 12 years, is developing and refining infrared light as a treatment modality for the brain.
Interesting, Dr. Theodore. Interesting indeed. So let's talk about the treatment resistant redefine. The term treatment resistant depression can feel like a life sentence. How
Hmm.
are these new approaches fundamentally redefining what resistance means and offering pathways where traditional pharmacotherapy like failed?
Yeah, yeah. And again, we're back to that chemical imbalance theory of depression. If you don't respond to an SSRI, you don't respond to a second SSRI, then they try a serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor like Effexor or, you know, anyways, the or they try a norepinephrine dopamine reuptake like Wellbutrin. Then what you're getting is you're flogging the same dead horse. Chemical imbalance, chemical imbalance, chemical imbalance. But we've in fact shown that that is not true. The chemical imbalance theory for depression has been disproven. So you need to turn on neuroplasticity. Now, that's one of the reasons Effexor, venlafaxine, works a little bit better than the other antidepressants. There's actually data showing it turns on neuroplasticity, and the frontal lobe gets thicker and the hippocampus gets bigger with venlafaxine treatment. Still, the response rate is no better than 16%. You need something that powerfully turns on neuroplasticity. Ketamine, for example, in our research in our clinic. I've been running a ketamine clinic for 12 years, and we keep data on all our patients. The response rate is 78%. That is, 78% of the people get better. Now, the nationwide response rate is 52%. We could talk about why that is, but let's not get derailed. 78% is not 100%, right? That means
Mm-hmm.
there's 22% of the people are not responding to ketamine. Why? Well, you have to realize that depression is a final common pathway of a number of things happening to the brain, a number of insults to the brain. For example, if a person has a traumatic brain injury or a concussion, their likelihood of developing depression is 5 times higher than the normal rate, 5 times higher. There are patients who have developed infectious processes in their brain. Now, I used to say that, and people would look at me like I had a third eye. But right, but now
Mm-hmm.
we've had COVID, and people know that after COVID, they can still be sick. They can have long COVID. And what is long COVID? But often a reactivation of certain viruses inside of our brain. They're reactivated by the cytokine storm. Well, those viruses have been living in our brains and reactivating in our brains for as long as man has existed on the planet. And understanding that a virus can make the brain malfunction and therefore be depressed, I have a whole host of patients, hundreds and hundreds of patients, who I have treated with antivirals. And lo and behold, their depression goes away because I treated the real cause of their depression, not just treating the symptom of depression. Okay?
Yes.
So, where's the infrared light fit in? This is um, infrared light, certain wavelengths of infrared light, if it can get through the scalp and skull and reach the neuron, activate the mitochondria within the neurons. Mitochondria, those little organelles that make energy. Well, they not only make more energy, but they send signals to the chromosomes turning on proteins. One of those proteins that they turn on is brain derived neurotrophic factor. That's the driver of neuroplasticity in the adult brain. So, infrared light can turn on neuroplasticity through the mitochondria. Ketamine turns on neuroplasticity through the glutamate receptor. Two different pathways coming together to increase BDNF and turn on neuroplasticity. But the infrared light has to be able to get through the scalp and skull. All these devices that you can put on your head, you can buy a little doohickey that costs you $2,000 or a helmet or some other wrap or something like that. They're putting out half a watt per LED. And that half a watt is hitting your scalp and going zero point 0.8 millimeters into the skin and stopping. It is not reaching the brain. What we're doing is we went into the research lab and figured out how much energy do I have to put on the scalp to get through the scalp and the skull in 3 centimeters into the brain. We worked out how to do that safely and effectively, and that resulted in our multi-watt infrared light therapy. It's patented and it is highly effective. And I'll tell you, let's just talk about depression for a second.
Yes, go
We
ahead.
did we did a study in 2017 on depression in our patients, and the response rate was 93%. 93% of the patients had a 50% reduction in their depression scores. And almost all of them reached remission. They were no longer depressed. That is a remarkable number. That's the complete inverse of what you get with serotonin SSRIs, right?
Yes.
Uh, so the idea number one that neuroplasticity is the key to treating psychiatric disorders, not just depression, but PTSD, OCD, anxiety, um, uh, early Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, all of these things by turning on neuroplasticity. Long COVID, we're having remarkable results with long COVID because we're reducing inflammation and we're turning on neuroplasticity.
So, Dr. Theodore, let's talk about the speed of hope. Many antidepressants take 4 to 6 weeks for
Mm-hmm,
initial effect.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Some new treatments, like certain neuromodulation therapies, promise results in days. How
mm-hmm.
does this change in timeline after or alter the patient's experience and relationship with recovery?
Well, the, first off, I got to challenge the idea that neuromodulation, you're referring to TMS.
Mm-hmm.
If you do TMS, the standard protocol for depression is 40 treatments. That's 5 days a week for 8 weeks. So I don't know how they can claim that they're getting a response in days. And I don't see that in the research literature. Now, granted, if you stick an electrode into the brain, uh, you know, deep brain stimulation, and you put it in the right place and you flip the switch, the person will not be depressed because you're directly electrically stimulating the subgenual frontal cortex. But other than that, there are no treatments for depression. The vagal nerve stimulation, I mean, yeah, maybe, but those are highly invasive surgical procedures, and you wear a battery pack in your body for the rest of your life. What we saw with infrared light therapy was that in our study in 2017, patients were responding in 4 weeks. So they were seeing a significant reduction in their depression scores by 4 weeks. And that's about as fast as anything out there. The antipsychotics claim that they get a response within a couple of weeks, but when you look at what their response is, it's a 2-point reduction on the quick inventory of depression symptomatology test. And 2 points on a quiz means that, maybe you don't wake up as often in the night, or you feel just a smidge less self-recrimination. It's not a huge change in depression symptoms, 2 points. It just isn't. So we have to be careful about the speed of change. But let's look at the inverse of speed of change, my friend. I can't tell you how many patients tell me, "Oh yeah, I'm on this SSRI my doctor put me on." And well, how long? What dose are you on? Oh, let's say Lexapro 20 milligrams. Well, how long have you been on that? A year. Do you feel better? Not really, doc. I mean, it's like, why do doctors sit around and let patients suffer for months and months and months? It's do something different. it's
Mm-hmm.
it's time for neuromodulation. Yeah.
Yes, definitely do something else, people. So let's do talk about the ketamine or psychedelic frontier.
Hmm.
Ketamine clinics and psilocybin research have captured public attention beyond the
Hmm.
hype. How do these substances work differently from the brain compared to a traditional antidepressants? And what is the crucial role for the therapeutic container or
Hmm.
configuration?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Thanks for asking that. Well, so psilocybin it has a complicated series of interactions with neurons. But one thing that's for sure is they are not changing neurotransmitter levels. It's not about inhibiting serotonin reuptake or anything like that. There's an interesting drug in the pipeline that's based on LSD. And again, not modulating dopamine levels or serotonin levels or norepinephrine levels. Ketamine works on a glutamate receptor. And there's a lot of confusion about ketamine. But what I talk about in the book and detail the science very thoroughly is that ketamine is activating brain-derived neurotrophic factor and therefore driving neuroplasticity. Um, One of the things about ketamine that bothers me a lot, and one of the reasons I wrote the book, frankly, was that the way that ketamine is being administered is incorrect. Most of these clinics are saying you must come and get 6 infusions over 2 weeks, so 3 infusions a week for 2 weeks. And that comes from some of the early multi infusion protocols when they were doing research. They said, oh, look, let's do 6 infusions in 2 weeks. I literally called up the guy who headed up the study and said, okay, what's your neurobiological reason for picking 6 infusions in 2 weeks? You know what his answer was? His very scientific answer? He said, I don't know. It sounded good. That was it. That was the science. So the problem with 6 infusions in 2 weeks is it's way too fast.
Mm,
Neuroplasticity takes time. Neuroplasticity takes time. An axon grows a millimeter a day. You're not going to rewire the frontal cortex in 2 weeks. So I never did infusions more than once a week. And so for 5 years, it was once a week. And then I had patients who were coming in from out of town. So flying in once a week was inconvenient. They'd come in every 2 weeks. We got exactly the same result. And so now I tell my patients, look, we're going to do infusions every 2 weeks because we want to give the neuroplasticity time. And the outcome is exactly the same. The number of infusions that my patients need to get better on average is 4.3. 4.3 if they get them once a week, 4.3 if they get them once every 2 weeks, 4.3 if they come in once every month. Rather than 6 infusions, plus then you need boosters because you're not better after 2 weeks, which is, you know what that is?
mm.
That's these clinics making cash, making money off of patients suffering. I have no room for that. I have no tolerance for that whatsoever.
Interesting, Dr. Theodore. So let's talk about the inflammation hypothesis or
Yeah,
hypothesis.
yeah, excellent.
Emerging science link depression to systemic inflammation. How are anti inflammatory approaches like diet, supplements, or even medications targeting our body being integrated
Hmm.
into a cutting edge treatment protocols?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely spot on. One of the things that I recommend all my patients to be on is curcumin. Curcumin is a natural anti-inflammatory, and so it helps your body in all sorts of ways. I've had people who their back pain has gotten better just being on curcumin. So just at a very fundamental level, I really am invested in reducing inflammation. Um, Back in, I think it was 2015, we published a paper, Paulo Casano at Harvard, myself, and a few other folks, on inflammation and its role in depression. And really analyze that. And that's where, again, infrared light therapy comes in. Remember, I mentioned that infrared light reduces inflammation in long COVID. Well, it's reducing inflammation in every brain. That's why one of the reasons it helps Alzheimer's. But it also helps depression by reducing that inflammation. So, uh, exercise is critically important. Improving sleep is critically important because sleep leads to improved clearance of toxins and inflammatory proteins from the brain through the lymphatic system. So all of those things is very natural things. Get some sunlight, get some exercise, get good sleep, uh, get rid of all the processed food, which are pro-inflammatory. And if that's not working, then come get multi-watt infrared light.
Mhm. Well, that is interesting, interesting. Master Dr. Theodore, personalized medicine and biomarkers is the future of depression treatment, moving toward a model where a blood test or genetic panel or a brain scan guides the choice of therapy. How
Hmm.
close are we to this reality, and what are the most promising biomarkers? Dr.
We're
Theodore.
yeah, we're a long, long way from that.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say it. In the sense that some fundamental biomarkers can make a difference. For example, if you do a functional brain scan, a SPECT scan, or a PET scan, and you see evidence of traumatic brain injury, then your treatment should be different for depression than it would be for someone who doesn't have a brain injury. An injured brain doesn't respond to medications the same way an uninjured brain does. Another example would be inflammation. I'm involved in nuclear medicine. There is an inflammation marker being developed. Um, on the genetic side, there's so much misinformation about these genetic studies. And I talk about this in the book. I spend a whole chapter talking about these genetic studies and these tests that you can do. And the challenge is, number one, most of what the test is telling you is about your liver. It's not talking about your brain. So it's talking about what enzymes metabolize the medications you're taking. And if you're a slow metabolizer, you should be on a lower dose. If you're a rapid metabolite, you need to be on a higher dose, etc. Very few of those markers are related to, say, depression or bipolar disorder or ADHD. And those markers, unfortunately, in their own clinical studies, these companies are doing their own studies of these genetic markers. They change the accuracy and success of treatment by about 12%. That's it.
12%.
So we're not there yet. We're a long ways away.
Long, long way.
Mhm.
So, Dr. Theodore, tell us the lifestyle prescription. Innovative does not always mean high tech, right? So, how are
Right.
lifestyle intervention like targeted exercise protocols or
Hmm.
circadian rhythm
Hmm.
hacking or
Hmm.
specific dietary change being validated by science and integrated as a core or
Hmm.
non negotiable treatment components?
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the things I talk about in my, TikTok and Instagram videos and Facebook videos. Number one, certain supplements are really, really good for you. And certain food groups are really good for you, and certain food groups are to be avoided. One of the food groups that should be avoided is anything that comes in a box. Processed food, fast food is just full of unhealthy, pro-inflammatory uh, things that lead you towards diabetes. Dale Bredesen, who wrote The End of Alzheimer's, um, he is really talking about a food pyramid that's upside down. Carbohydrates are very, very scant, and vegetables make up a large part of the diet, and then protein, healthy protein on top of that. And that reduces the insulin resistance of the cell. And insulin resistance, it's a derived measure. You have to do a variety of blood tests, but you can determine your insulin resistance. And the higher your insulin resistance, the more likely you are to have mental illness and the more likely you are to have dementia, such as Alzheimer's disease. And what he has done is shown that reversing that food pyramid, in other words, flipping it on its head, getting rid of the carbohydrates. We're supposed to eat, bread and cereals, and they're all bad for you, really. And emphasizing vegetables and protein. Now, a stopped clock is right 2 times a day, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, Health Secretary Kennedy came out and said we need to do an inverse food pyramid with carbohydrates being very little and vegetables and protein being very big. So, I mean, again, a stop clock is right, twice a day. He got something right. It doesn't mean I agree with anything else he says, but I really advocate for that change in diet. Exercise is important. Reducing alcohol is very, very important. It's so ingrained in our culture. I mean, I love wine, but I realize the importance of not drinking excessively and drinking, very moderately. Uh, and red wine, has some very good things for your brain and for your cholesterol. Um, and lastly, getting some sunlight. I mean,
Sunlight, vitamin D.
it's dark when I leave work. It's dark when I get to work.
Mm, true.
So I'm not the best role model of that, but I encourage everyone to just get some sunlight.
Mhm. Get sunlight, people, or vitamin D.
Mm.
Is it good, Dr. Theodore, that instead of sunlight, you just taking vitamin D?
Well, sunlight does other things. I mean, there's other wavelengths. There's, besides the ultraviolet that activates the vitamin D in your skin, there's infrared light.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's hitting your skin. And one of the things that I have been researching and demonstrating is that even if infrared light just hits your skin, there's an indirect effect to the whole body. So
Okay.
you, you could put infrared light on your foot and you will indirectly benefit your gut and therefore your brain. So getting sunlight in general is good for you. And by the way, if you're outside, you're probably walking or maybe running or at least getting some steps in. So you're exercising, which is also good for you.
Well, double purpose, people.
There you go.
Redefining remission, Dr. Theodore, is the goal of these new approaches simply the absence of symptoms or a more positive state of well being, resilience, and post traumatic growth? How does this
Mhm.
treatment goal itself change with these tools?
I love that question. One of the things that I write about I give a lot of case examples in Brighter Days Ahead. And I'm struck by how many of my patients have come back to me months, years later. One patient, she's now 10 years since her last ketamine treatment. And every, you know, December, she writes me a thank you letter. And she says the sentence, I live a joyful life. And I hear that sentence from so many patients that I am living a joyful life now. I love that.
Mhm.
So that would be the definition of remission.
So, the role of psychotherapy in the new era. With a powerful biological intervention emerging, what is the evolving, irreplaceable role of the therapeutic relationship with the modalities like CBT, DBT, or ACT?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, the hard truth is that when the large study meta analyses looking at psychotherapy show about a 30% response rate,
Mm-hmm.
which is sad. Um, However, there's so much great value in the therapeutic relationship. So if you have a good psychologist, a good therapist, or a good psychiatrist, and you trust him or her, and they become a platform upon which you can work out, your past stuff about your dad or the past stuff about your mom or whatever. And that's a really important quality that no medication and no neurobiomodulation technique is ever going to achieve. You can stick an electrode in every single person and turn it on and deep brain stimulate everybody, and there'd still be people who would be miserable because they have unresolved relationship issues. That's the value of psychotherapy, is working on relationship issues. I got to give a shout out to EMDR, which I think is the neurobiology of EMDR has become more clear. It wasn't what we thought it was originally, but EMDR allows us to take a traumatic event and strip off the emotion, strip off the pain, and still have the memory of the event, but not the horrible message that it gave us about ourselves and the horrible trauma emotions. So EMDR is a very, very powerful and important modality that I appreciate, and I used to do it with patients all the time. I happen to have come out into private practice right after Columbine happened. So I treated a host of students who were in this, first of the mass school shootings, with good results using EMDR.
A good result. Definitely a good result. So, Dr. Theodore, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in a sixth season, abstract poetry in its third season, and my book 101 review in sixth season, too, comedy 101 in third season, and my food 101 in sixth season two. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101, review, music 101 are in fifth season, science 101, sex 101, fourth season, and my baby podcast review 101. Law 101, mental health 101, motivation 101, entrepreneurship 101, and of course, Bible verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. I hope one day I have medicine 101 or Doctor 101. What do you think, Dr. Theodore?
I think Medicine 101 sounds right on.
Medicine 101 with my co-host, Dr. Theodore. Imagine. I love to do that. So, Dr. Theodore, tell us beyond this innovation, what is the realistic, evidence-based foundation for this promise that you want every reader who feels hopeless to understand, especially your book itself?
Yeah, I think the key message that everybody needs to understand is that neuroplasticity can happen in any brain. I've worked with patients who were 35 years out from their brain injury, and we still saw neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the key to healing the brain.
Hmm. Healing the brain. Let's heal our brain, people, because there's a lot of fags in our brain. So, Dr. Theodore, thank you so much for sharing your
Mhm.
knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
So, yeah, I think that the best way to learn about what we're doing is go to healmybrain.info, healmybrain.info. And of course, my book's on Amazon. Happy to have you be the first person to buy it.
Yes, definitely. People, let's support Dr. Theodore Henderson because if you support him, more brighter days ahead. Good life. So, Dr. Theodore, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, people. See you soon.